thank the Native Hawaiian people whose land this legitimately is. And thank you all for coming to hear Pat Elder, who's an investigative reporter and has been studying PFAS for a long time and is here to give us the story of what it is that's in our water.
That's okay. I think I can project my voice well enough, right? Yes. Okay, thank you. I work with a group called Civilian Exposure out of Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. I actually live in St. Mary's City, Maryland, which is about 2 hours south of Washington, near the Potomac and the Chesapeake, where they come together. And tonight I'm going to talk about per and polyfluoroalkyl substances, or PFAS, and that'll be the first part of my presentation, a kind of generic presentation about how and why this is so darn important, and then I gathered some statistics regarding Hawaii and about other contaminants, because Hawaii is way behind the times, and the state has really been asleep at the switch and has not been testing for these most potent chemicals. So I don't really have much to give you in terms of PFAS levels in Hawaii, but I'll get to that. So I'm all about trying to save people from dying from drinking water. I'm all about defending human health, and I got here as a pacifist. I mean, I was sitting in a high school classroom in a Catholic school, Archbishop John Carroll, on North Capitol Street in Washington, D.C., and the priest said to us during religion class, "Did you realize that our government is burning babies? What are you going to do about it?" And that kind of got me on the way, And so I've been involved in the anti-war movement and involved in putting people on the street in Washington. It didn't seem to work out too well. I mean, as far as like ending the war. And then I was involved in the counter-recruitment movement. I wrote a book on military recruitment, and managed to actually draft a bill in Maryland. We got 33 co-sponsors. This was 3 years ago, which would ban the use of lead ammunition in the state's high school cafeterias. I mean, hell, we thought it was a pretty good idea, but it was judged to be too anti-military, and we couldn't get the backing of the Democratic leadership in the state. We did get 33 sponsors, but there's 2,200 firing ranges in high school cafeterias and gyms now, affiliated with the J. Rotson program. And I just figured, well, hell, that's pretty low-lying fruit. And I struck out, so I switched gears again. So, it's just like fourth quarter, change in strategy here for me. And so, I'm into this military contamination. I was at a conference in Minnesota 3 years ago, and I met Dr. Pat Hines, who was EPA Lady of the Year. I was talking about contamination affiliated with J. Rotson programs, in the schools, and she was talking about burn pits and all of the people sickened by these burn pits. And she told me about PFAS, and it's been 3 years, and I haven't let go. So anyway, speaking the truth, and that was shown. When I was, a sophomore in college, I read Silent Spring, and Silent Spring is a great book by this woman, Rachel Carson. And then Holly and I crossed the country last year. Holly's my daughter. And we did what was called the Million Parts Per Trillion Tour, where we drove from California all the way to Florida, and then up the coast to Washington. And we stopped at 8 military bases where each had more than 1 million parts per trillion of PFAS in the water. And we listened to her audio book of Silent Spring. And she got it. I mean, a second time around, and you can see what she said. It's a curious situation. This is 1951. It's a curious situation that the sea from which life first arose should now be threatened by the activities of one form of that life. But the sea, though changed in a sinister way, will continue to exist. The threat is rather to life of its own. So the sea is the sink, man, for all the crap we're putting into the earth. We put it in every which way. Sometimes we put it in the air, it winds up in the sea. We put it in the groundwater, it winds up in the sea. We put it in surface water, it winds up in the sea. And so that's what she saw. She's a modern day prophetess. Rachel Carson. So, and before I go too far, Ernesto Calderon. Anybody know that name? He was a great Jesuit priest who died yesterday, Presente. He was a liberation theologist, and he worked in the Nicaraguan regime, so he was a very good man and had a great influence on me. So anyway, to the issue at hand. PFOS is perfluorooctane sulfonic acid. It's an 8-carbon chain, and PFAS is the all per and polyfluoroalkyl substances. So let me try to get this straight. PFAS, oh God, there's 6,700 of them. Okay. The only two that the media seem to be worried about, and the only two that the military is worried about, are PFOS and PFOA. Okay, so if you take 8 carbon atoms and you fluoridate them, what the hell does that mean? I don't know, but that's what I'm reading. So if you fluoridate them and you get 2 or more fluoride atoms attached to a carbon atom, okay, and then you might have a nitrogen atom on one side or oxygen atom on the other side, but if you have that basics, you've created the strongest bond ever made by human beings. Okay? It was bumped into by scientists at a 3M plant in New Jersey in 1938. Not, I mean, coincidentally, the same year German scientists split the atom. Both are existential threats to humanity. It's that serious. They didn't really realize what they had. Okay, but, and it was really discovered by accident. But thanks to the Manhattan Project, the military understood that this stuff could put out an atomic fire. This stuff was so powerful that it could put out, petrochemical fires. It could put out fires that were hotter than anything, and they could snuff them out like nothing. And they also realized it repelled grease like nothing. And it could be a cleaner like nothing. And so they began to, after the war, develop applications for this stuff, like Teflon, one of the applications. Or, sprays like Scotch Guard, or sprays, things to keep, the water off, fire retardant like these things. And so, it's been widely used. And so this is arguably the most carcinogenic substance ever developed. Not only that, it's a mutagen. So it takes the DNA and changes it forever. And that brings us up to its third characteristic, which that it never breaks down. And that's this stuff doesn't go away. So we have deer meat or deer that are poisoned because they drink little streams that bubble out of Portsmouth Air Force Base that was closed 30 years ago. This stuff doesn't go away. It is produced into firefighting foam. And these guys used it with reckless abandon. The military knew damn well in the early 70s that it was fatal. And they continued to use it. So let me just take you through this here. And you know the story of Icarus and Daedalus, right? And I never get it straight, which guy was which, but I think Daedalus was the daddy and Icarus was the kid, and Daedalus said, look, man, I got this great idea, you take wings, and then you could, put wax on them, we could fly, but don't go too close to the sun, because if you do, it'll melt, and you fall to your death. But Icarus didn't heed his dad's, warning, and so he fell to his death. And this is a 16th century Italian relief. It's just beautiful. But you get the idea. It's the same idea that Einstein wrote about. after really being part of, nuclear fission. And that's, we've uncorked something here, and we're hopefully we can keep this under control, but I have severe doubts. And so that brings us to the next panel, which has to do with Pandora's box. You know that fable as well. She opened that box, man, and she couldn't get those demons back in there. And that's the same thing with PFAS. It is pervasive, and we've uncorked it, and it's everywhere. And I mean, we can't get the EPA even to stop allowing it to be produced. So we got a long way to go. And you in Hawaii may be in more trouble than anywhere else. Okay, this will give you an idea of this stuff. So what the military does is generally they've got three ways that this stuff goes into our water. Okay, one way is that they take airplane fuselages that they're done with, and they put them up on a stand, and then they soak them with several thousand gallons of jet fuel, J6, and usually kerosene and other types of oils. They light them on fire, and it's a massive explosion. I don't know if you've ever thrown a gallon of gas on a big pile, and you light the match and go, it's like that. And then, they teach the firefighters how to use these carcinogens to put the fire out. So that'll just give you an idea. But look at the consistency of this stuff. And so, it ends. They take out the hose and they squirt it all off. It goes into the grass, and then it goes into the groundwater, and then it goes into the surface water, and it goes into the sewer water, and it goes into the superficial aquifer, and then it goes into the deeper aquifer. And then it winds up in the sink. Sometimes, the ocean. That's one way. Here's another one at March Air Force Base up in California. Sort of the same sort of thing, but you get the idea. And here are the children outside of in Pennsylvania, and they're enjoying the foam. This was, a generation after the military already knew the stuff was a killer. But, there's a difference between, one aspect of the command and maybe, the guy that was in Warminster Navy facility in Pennsylvania that allowed this to take place. And, of course, we don't have anything to worry about it, and so the Air Force published a series of photos. This is all scripted. Don't worry, it's fun. And so what we had here was a suppression system where you have a foam system. And they have these foam systems in the hangars. And some of these suppression systems are so powerful that they can release 17 feet of foam to cover a 2-acre hangar in 2 minutes. You gotta figure, these F-35s are really important. And some of them cost $110 million. And you can have 6 or 8 of them in one hangar. So you want to put that fire out. Even though there are fluoride-free foams that are available and every bit as capable. And the rest of the world is switched. I mean, that's the irony here. The rest of the world is switched over. The Europeans aren't using this stuff, man. Most of them, anyway. They got the memo. It's killing people. Okay? So look how the Air Force, there you go. That is 45 seconds into a release. In 2 minutes, that entire hangar is filled. And all that stuff just goes back into the ground. It's just horrendous. Look, there's nothing to fear. I mean, really, it's not encouraged. Okay. Now, this is one way it hurts us all, a direct pathway. So you take a typical hangar, and a lot of the hangars have, where's our buddy? Okay. So, a lot of the hangars have sewer drains. So, these will actually hook up to the sanitary sewer system. I don't know if you know the difference between, a regular old sewer system and a sanitary sewer system. The sanitary sewer system goes with, the material. When you flush your toilet, you have solid waste and you have liquid waste, and it goes to a treatment facility. And the treatment facility basically separates the solid from the liquid, okay? Well, if you've got carcinogen material going into this treatment plant, okay, the liquid that is pulled apart from it contains the carcinogens, and the solid waste contains the carcinogens. Typically, what we do, and what you do here in Hawaii, is you take the solid waste and you put it on a giant truck and you bring it out to where the pineapples grow and you just slather it on the fields. What else are you going to do with it? It's forever chemicals. It's still there. And it's in your agricultural produce as well. Strawberries, asparagus, and lettuce are the three worst things to eat for PFAS because they have a tendency to just suck it up. And so, like throughout Germany, there are lots of areas now where they've banned, they've taken them off the market when they've discovered that the soils where they've grown, have contained PFAS. So, any questions swelling in your brains right here? Or you want me to just keep going for another 30 minutes? Yeah, Alan?
So, you've been talking about the PFAS that are used for fire suppression for airplanes, but I believe that's not at all unique to the military. Is that correct?
Well, Congress actually mandated the use of these carcinogenic foams, for the last 30 years. But we managed to get Congress to change that last year. And so now the FAA has promulgated a regulation, and that regulation says that individual airports no longer have to use them. Look, it's a testament of the power of the chemical industry in Congress. John Barrasso is the head of the United States Senate, Environment and Public Works Committee, and he's also the #1 recipient of cash from the chemical industry. They're making a ton of money. What is it that I'm saying that doesn't make sense to you? Hell, it all makes sense. It's just filling you in on some of the specifics here, that's all. So, here's another hellacious photo, but look at, does it remind you of Iwo Jima in a kind of scary kind of way? And the statue. Oh, foam parties. Travis Air Force Base has had a series of foam parties. So it's quite a sight to see. You fill up a hangar like that with 17 feet of foam, so they bring people in to watch. And, if you look, this is a lousy image, I'm not really happy. But some of these snowflakes are actually falling behind the people. This is the most carcinogenic material known to man. And they have foam parties at Travis Air Force Base. There's another photo from Travis, released by the Air Force. The other one that one prior was a YouTube. But the Air Force, they released these photos. And so what this is from is the sprinkler system was emptied out, and they take giant blowers, those giant fans, and they just blow everything out. It's like the Wizard of Oz. Remember when it was snowing? It was really asbestos that they used back then, Metro Goldwyn Mayer. And remember, they all fell asleep because it was the witch, right? This is where all the money is going. But again, the point is, we got to put those fires out. So if you take all those transport planes and you put them in a hangar, you got to be able to put a fire out. Now, get a little bit closer to what we're talking about here. So the fire training area at Travis Air Force Base, where they lit fires, what they did at Travis and what they did in a lot of places, they dug a 200 diameter crater that was 1.5 feet deep, and they filled it with JP6, usually jet fuel, and kerosene and oil. and then they lit it on fire, and they would take 6 or 8 airmen, and they'd put it out. And everybody involved had a great time. That's part of it. Don't laugh. There's a psychology of this. It's fun. Bombs are fun. It's just fun. I mean, who here as a kid, well, especially boys, it's kind of a sexist thing, but didn't like cherry bombs, man? I mean, it's part of the mentality. Blow shit up. Why did you join? I joined because I wanted to blow shit up. But anyway, here, the fire training area is here. And you know, Giant Plains and Union Creek is here, and Union Creek carries all the contaminants into the valley. It's not rocket science. And you can do all the water tests along, you know, for the municipal water sources and see the spike in all of the PFAS in the water. I mean, here's another routine drill. Look at that. I'm not okay with this. What are they doing? You know, it's just absolutely horrendous. This one, I think, takes the cake. This is actually in Spangdahlem. And in Spangdahlem, kind of a segue here, interesting. I was over there last year and the year before, just trying to stoke, you know, revolution. And, you know, there's a little town next to Spangdahlem U.S. NATO Air Base. It's called Wittlich Land. And Wittlich Land, for years, had been spreading the, you know, the solid waste from its sewer treatment plant on its farm fields. You got to go there, man. The Germans got it going on, by the way. Healthcare for everybody, daycare for everybody, advanced college for everybody, trains of work, everybody's employed. You know, I mean, and then they got this. Then they stopped using the stuff. You know, they stopped using the stuff themselves. It's banned, but the Americans use it. And so, the little town of Wittlich Land tried to sue the United States government, and they were told they weren't allowed. The Americans said you're not allowed because of the SOFA agreement, that Status of Forces agreement, executed between the United States and Germany in 1951, that precludes suit over environmental issues. So they said, well, I mean, they were told by the German government they could, you know, that they couldn't put it on fields anymore, that they had to incinerate it. And they realized that incineration is probably not a good idea because you got to get the stuff up to 1600 degrees Fahrenheit. I mean, after all, it's a firefighting foam, so you got to get it really hot. Their incinerators didn't go that hot. And so they had built new incinerators, and every time you incinerate, it's $50,000 to $100,000. So they sued the federal government of Germany for entering into the agreement with the Americans. Perhaps a degree of duress, 1951. But anyway, so that it's pending. But there's hope there. Somebody needs to smack the Americans a little bit here. What are you doing? But it's not the only base. Oh my Lord, there's I think 18 different bases in Germany, and Germans have had to close literally hundreds of miles of creeks and rivers to fishing because they're serious. They actually, you know, they do science and they heed it. You know, I mean, science is out of vogue here. It's just, it used to be so cool. I just like it. Anyway. March, so what do you get when you ask them for information? Where is it really leaching out of March Air Force Base? Huh, guys? Come on. Huh? Well, we'll tell you. Here we go. So, yeah, I mean, you know, there's things that they don't want us to know. But we knew there were things they didn't want us to know, right? March Air Force Air Reserve Base allows poisoned surface water to drain into the Paris Valley storm drain. And all the way down Paris Valley into, you know, the deeper river, you know, you have these carcinogens flowing. It's just not rocket science. That's what's happening here. Here's another one that's really bad in Fresno. This is the firefighting training area. Okay? And a mile and, mile and a quarter away is where the water treatment plant is. And so Of course, if you test the water in Fresno, as the California State Resources Control Board did in 2019, you'll find PFAS levels above the voluntary EPA threshold. I'll get to the EPA in a little bit. They're pathetic, they're evil, and they're worthless. They're not doing anything. They're not monitoring the stuff. They're not telling Hawaii, hey Hawaii, you gotta test for the stuff. You gotta start taking care of people. They're asleep. So stuff is happening. You know, here this gets to the point. You know, about the sludge. You can't slather it on fields, and you can't incinerate it. And even if you get it above 1600, there's a series written by Sharon Lerner of The Intercept. She's brilliant about incineration and sewage, and she covers it. And you know, she says this is one of the worst things. They take all of this stuff, the military, to a facility in Ohio on the Ohio River, and they burn it daily. And we can test the fields nearby and find a lot of it not destroyed. This is the Naval Air Station near me, but the point here is that you kind of just fill in the blank. So if you Google Patuxent River Naval Air Station, you know, tomorrow or the next day, you'll find some new news stories. All right? So, near my house, and this wasn't really part of it, but I ordered testing kits for PFAS. I live on a saltwater creek. So, you know, not only that, it's the, you know, St. Mary's City, Maryland's, you know, colonial capital. And so I just took water from right in front of me, mostly salt. I have oysters, crabs. I have a half-acre oyster bed. I always have crab pots there. And so I sent the sample in, $75, and I got back the results that were, you know, 1,894.3 parts per trillion for PFAS, including, you know, 1,555.4 parts per trillion for PFOS, and did a little bit of research and found that similar heights of levels outside of Peace Air Force Base, 30 years ago closed, had oysters with 55,000 parts per trillion of PFAS. Oysters, more than anything, suck this stuff up. Oysters are carcinogenic. Don't eat oysters. And you heard it here. And don't eat the crabs. When you open a crab and you got that yellow mustard there, that's where all the PFAS lines up. And a lot of the fish are completely contaminated. And so, you know, calling on the Maryland Department of Health, you know, Maryland Department of Education to put in effect a moratorium on eating these things. And so there was a public meeting today. I wasn't there. 200 people showed up, and the military did a dog and pony show. And so there's an article that I wrote, and it's called The Survey Monkey and the Dog and Pony Show. And I would encourage you to read that. The Survey Monkey and the Dog and Pony Show. It tells you what a charade the Navy is and what the military does in terms of psychological operations. They track you when you go to these meetings. They take your information. They ask you to fill out questionnaires, and they fill you with information that is not correct, and they diffuse resistance. Want to know how I really feel? China Lake, that's a base in California, had 8 million parts per trillion. So here I am awarding it the prestigious 8 million parts per trillion club award. They earned it. Not as bad as England Air Force Base. Remember that, Holly? Louisiana. They had 10,800,000 parts per trillion of PFAS in the water, and you had impoverished African American communities living within a quarter mile drinking from shallow wells, okay? Meanwhile, Harvard University School of Public Health and the Environmental Working Group, which is really an important group, you might want to jot that down to take notes, Environmental Working Group, say 1 part per trillion per day should be the limit. Mostly because of liver cancer, but also because of kidney cancer and testicular cancer, and other diseases, and especially for pregnant women. So you can eat 1 oyster with 55,000, or you can have an oyster platter, a fried oyster platter, and a pregnant woman can consume 500,000 parts per trillion of PFAS, and everybody's cool with that? No, this is a crisis. I'll get to the women in a minute. Space program. So look up Cape Canaveral, Patrick Air Force Base cancer clusters. I mean, when they send a rocket out into space, they're worried about this whole thing blowing up, right? And so they've got all of these carcinogenic foams on the ready. And so the fish, the wildlife, the prawns, everything in the water here is mutated. If it's not dead, we've changed its DNA. And lots of human beings that are sickened and have died as a result of it. I mean, just start Googling PFAS. This is from my beach. This is what started the firestorm down in St. Mary's County. So I did. This is carcinogenic foam, and this is an oyster that is okay as far as the Maryland Department of Health is concerned to eat. Shouldn't be. And these are the results that I received. You can read it. Same with the wine. I got a hunch it's worse, especially in Pearl Harbor. Wait till that second part. So we put it a little bit in focus. So 16 members of one family outside of Peterson Air Force Base. They live in an apartment building. All of the drainage from Peterson, from the firefighting area, went out one drain area. And they lived in an apartment building that wasn't far from there. That community had one well that drew from the aquifer, that drew from Peterson Air Force, that was contaminated with the PFAS. And this one guy, Mark Favors, in the back center, 12 people in his family dead. And nobody has been compensated. They passed a hat in that community, and they went to Capitol Hill last summer. And they got, Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez to give them hugs. And they got hugs from her. And then, they went around and, they got, oh gosh darn, it's a shame. I'll get more to Congress in a little bit. And now let me just tell you about 300 women at George Air Force Base. Go ahead, read that. So one woman starts a Facebook group, and she said, I served at George Air Force Base, and I had a stillborn. And another one comes along, and she said, I have ovarian cancer today. Another one, I have ovarian cancer. Another one, I have ovarian. Dozens and dozens of ovarian cancers, all kinds of miscarriages, all kinds of stillborns. And, there's this story. I think I have it as my next slide. Oh no, this is Lisa's child. Lisa today is a great activist, and she delivered a stillborn at George Air Force Base. That's what they do. I'm a girl, but they blacked out her first name. All 300 of those women had their medical records redacted by the Air Force. Okay, the Air Force, they went to the Air Force, they said, what happened to me? What's going on? And everybody's record was redacted. Just like they redacted the stuff from March Air Force Base. It's the same organization. So there was a story in Military Times. Heck, I don't have, let me go back. But there was a story in Military Times by Tara Kopp. And, you know, it's called Why Women Were Told Not to Get Pregnant at George Air Force Base. They systematically told women not to get pregnant. Several of the doctors against the base command, but just said, look, just wait until you get out of here and get pregnant. So I called Lisa, and I called Denise Torrey, and, you know, we raised some money, thanks to WILF, which is the Women's International League of Peace and Freedom. Patagonia Foundation funded us. And I said, do you want to come out to San Francisco and Berkeley and speak about what happened to you? And so hopefully, I don't know about the, you know, the coronavirus, you know, we'll be there on March 21st and 22nd. We're going to come out along with others from the George Air Force Base. But Denise's story is incredible. So, you know, here we are on a Zoom call last weekend, and, you know, it's Denise and her daughter Lauren, okay? What story they have. So Denise, you know, is fighting, you know, all kinds of gynecological problems. She is very sick, okay? Her daughter, well, she had one child and several miscarriages, and then, you know, hysterectomy. Her daughter, Lauren, was born. And when Lauren was a child, she was born at George Air Force Base, and they gave her the formula with the PFAS water. And so Lauren grew up normally and had one child, has had horrendous gynecological issues since then. Her child is 13 now. Last year she had her first period, and she never stopped bleeding. And she had to have a procedure which left her infertile for life. You know what? You can look it up in medical journals. This is a drug called PFAS. It wreaks havoc on a woman's reproductive system. Women are most at risk for this stuff, and it's just horrendous. And so, yeah, Denise Torrey will tell her story if we get a chance. So read this better than me. You know, where are we? PFAS is present in the placenta. It's passed to the baby through the umbilical cord in mother's milk. Most American babies are born with an average of 10 different unregulated PFAS cartridges in their blood. Infectious diseases such as otis media, that's, you know, your ear, you know, problems. Unregulated, let's see, pneumonia, RS virus, varicella are more common in early life with higher levels. PFAS also contributes to ADHD, autism, and childhood asthma. The military is responsible for most of the PFAS in our environment, so you don't know about this. Just saying. Where is the indignation? Why aren't we just, you know, we're, you know, it's because they beat the shit out of us. We're beat. I mean, every day you pick up something else. I think this is just beyond. So I'm telling you, if you research this stuff, you'll see everything I have said here borne out. Pregnant? Don't drink well. Well water is really horrific. So, you know, you can have literally 1,000 times more hexavalent chromium-6, you know, the Aaron Brockovich chemical, 1,000 times more than that, coming out of a military base in the groundwater. And you can have a well, and you could be, and you're getting sick, and you're not putting two and two together. You know, and I have statistics right here in Pearl Harbor of that particular. We don't have the statistics on Hawaii because Hawaii doesn't regulate it. And Hawaii doesn't regulate it because the EPA says you don't have to worry about PFAS. The EPA says it's an unregulated substance. So they only have an advisory out, and that advisory is 70 parts per trillion. But they don't enforce that level. And so that is because the military, if the EPA or Congress says we are going to subject PFAS to CERCLA or Superfund. We're gonna subject PFAS to the Superfund law. That would mean that if the person who put that stuff in the environment knew damn well that what they were doing, they knew it was dangerous, and they did it anyway, then they got to clean it up, and they have to take care of the human beings they damaged. And the way I figure it, if that's pinned on the military, they're looking at, could be in excess of $100 billion, which is a lot of F-35s. And so, it ain't going to happen. And that's why it's not regulated. It's the stuff of revolution. Animals. So I'm down at at a conference on this stuff, and there's a woman from Warminster, Pennsylvania, and she said our dogs kept dying. Dogs kept dying. Yeah, usually, a dog lived 10, 12, 14 years, but they would die at 3 or 4 years. Well, how come? Because they drink from puddles. Same story up at Peace Air Force Base in New Hampshire. And the same story down at Patrick Air Force Base in Florida. Dogs and cats drink from puddles. The puddles are saturated with PFAS. They live adjacent to a military base. Animals don't live long. See, our water, for the most part, I don't know about Hawaii, I think right now they're probably scrambling because they realize slowly that you're beginning to figure out what's going on. There's a way to treat the water. I mean, think of a giant container about the size of, like, from here to that wall to there, this high, full of granulated carbon, just little bits of carbon. And you put a tube in, with dirty water, and you mix it all up, and you bring the water out, and it's cleansed of PFAS. It's expensive, and you have to continue to, replace the stuff regularly. But it creates drinking water that is pretty much clear of the PFAS. A lot of states have no knowledge, have given their people no knowledge, but I think they're scurrying around right now to try to clean the stuff up because they know people like yourselves are going to get in touch with your water boards, and I will show you more about who they are, and start asking what the levels of PFAS are. Okay? It's really the work that you need to do. Like, hey, how much PFAS is in our water? I want to know. And then you call the newspaper, and you tell the newspaper you asked, and you want to know how much is in the water, especially around Pearl and other fishes. Thousands of dead cows in Michigan. So the state of Michigan and New Mexico, 2 states, just saw people being sick, animals getting sick, and poisoned municipal water systems. And they, many of them, dozens and dozens of water systems. So they needed, tens of millions of dollars to rebuild everything. So they sued the Air Force. But that's not allowed. It's just like the Germans tried to sue the Air Force. From the imperial government, the state of Michigan, the state of New Mexico isn't any different than Guam or Okinawa or Germany. It's all the same. It's all the same. And so the Trump administration has been claiming sovereign immunity. Sovereign immunity, the government reserves the right to poison you and there's nothing you can do about it. Sovereign immunity means that we are immune from your prosecution. And so in both New Mexico and in Michigan, the United States government basically said, look, we're not subject to your laws. Because as soon as they give in, they're screwed. They're talking about massive liability. And so this is what the people of Michigan think of sovereign immunity, huh? Aesop's fable. You know, the lamb is downstream, and the lamb is drinking the water, and the wolf says, "Stop messing up my water!" And the lamb goes, I'm not, I'm downstream. And then, you know, the wolf goes, you know, you were saying mean things about me last year. And the lamb goes, I was just born 6 months ago. And then the wolf ate her up. You know, it's just a commentary on fascism. Somebody was this stuff. Mussolini and Hitler loved the concept of sovereign immunity. Google it. Sovereign immunity, Air Force, PFAS. Just a few other little things, just to spread it out a little bit. So, they tested tens of thousands of beagles at one place in California, and they injected them with radioactivity just to see what it would do. And so there is 35,000 gallons of dog feces. It's highly radioactive today. It's starting to leach. There's the lab. And one thing that's really cool is they tried cats, and the cats didn't cooperate. Right? Yeah, Cats Against Capitalism. It's a great, have you ever seen that Facebook page? It's called Cats Against Capitalism. Is it Facebook? Yeah. Oh, man. Oh, this is a fun one. So they bring all the J. Rotzi children throughout the state to watch things get blown up. Kids love explosives, you know? Of course, you know, it leaves a residual of RDX, which is how the carcinogenic. I'll tell the kids about that. Here's another thing about, you know, which was for a long time my passion. You know, the J. Rotzi squads around the country, there's 2,000 of them. Mostly the firing ranges are in the cafeterias, but a lot of the times the kids, or, you know, one parent would complain, I don't think it's right that you should have children firing guns in the cafeteria. And so then they go to a filthy armory, or they go to a filthy, you know, commercial outfit, you know, and you know, the kids breathe in the lead affiliated with a public school program. 50 bases in California radioactive. I didn't get a chance to look at California, but I'll show you how to do it. And that'll be the thrust of my second part. So remember the story I was telling you about the oysters? So I posted it on Facebook, and it went viral in the Navy community. And so last weekend, or 2 weekends ago, I got 50,000 hits. 26,000 hits on Saturday, and 24,000 hits on Sunday. Holy shit, this is great. And I found out that on Friday morning at the Patuxent River Naval Air Test Center, people were, you know, passing this around in email. My website on Patuxent River, you know, contamination and the oysters and, you know, all the firefighting foams used, and they stopped it from being public. So I started getting emails and, you know, Facebook messages from employees of NavAir saying they've discontinued my base. That, you know, so they would get this access denied from, listen to this name, Netmore.com. You know, so that is the Navy affiliate that bans stuff. So we got banned because they don't want people on base to know about contamination. And neither does the Trump administration. And so, you know, this one here was absolutely outrageous. This was the greatest thing in the world. You know, where you could put in your town or your zip code, and then it would give you the chemicals that are in the groundwater. And the tox map, you could just take a map, and then, you know, it would zoom down, and it would give you the toxins. But they shut it down because of groups like this people that are getting angry and beginning to put two and two together, so they want to shut this stuff down. And the Trump administration realizes that, you know, if you have an aroused citizenry, you know, then they're going to have to start paying the piper. You have unexploded ordnance littered in all of your islands. Of course, you know, Sergeant Wolf, you know, he tries to tell people on bases about unexploded ordnance. So here's Barrasso and Trump, and I mentioned already that Barrasso is the chair of the Senate's Environment and Public Works Committee, and you know, he's the Pentagon's point man. And he's also the chemical industry's point man, and he's doing his job really well. As I say, he's doing a bang-up job. And no offense here on the Democrats, but I want to just tell you real quickly the story, you know, with the PFAS Action Act. I know that some of you are upset. I've been given a hard time about this. But I spent some time up on Capitol Hill, you know, this summer, and I saw how the Democratic Party operates. Look, we know what the Republicans are all about. The Republicans control the Senate. Ain't nothing going to happen. They're not going to allow anything meaningful to take place, believe me. But the Democrats ought to know better, and some of them are really good, you know. But when you get down to the bottom of it, you know, at first they came up, Tom Parker of Delaware was a good guy, you know, and he came up with a bill that would have banned all 6,700 PFAS. We're not really banned them, but he would have set maximum contaminant levels for all of those in drinking water, and then work toward eliminating them, a step in the right direction. And he would have subjected all 6,700 to the Superfund site in order to clean up of all of it. And it was a good bill, but by the time it got through, what did they say, the sausage-making machine, it was down to two, PFAS, PFOS, and PFOA. And so that's what the Democrats drafted, and they sent it over to Barrasso. And the Senate has sat on it now for, I guess, about 3 months. It hasn't any activity, and so, you know, nothing will happen. But I was really disappointed. So remember the story of Rome with the lead, you know, and how, you know, lead actually led to the fall of the Roman Empire. So, I mean, this too could be part of our undoing. So that's all I have here. Holly, what do we do to get on to the second thing? So this next part, what time is it, guys? Am I morning? 7:32. How much time we got left?
An hour.
An hour. Oh, cool. Yeah, that's where I want to be. Trying to chase some people out already. Something I said. Should we take a break? I'll start with a little bit of legal, you know, analysis here in Hawaii, and then get into, you know, your water systems here, and you know, how to research what you're drinking. Okay, here we go. So you know, the Democrats basically got to the point where they asked for 3 things to happen, okay? And so 22 governors, Democrats, you know, got together and they signed a letter and they sent it to all of Congress, okay? And, you know, your governor chipped in, or Attorney General. And it basically says, look, you know, we want you to, this is in the beginning, you know, add the entire class of PFAS chemicals to the EPA's toxic release inventory. Okay, that's not the same thing as the Superfund site. The toxic release inventory is a list, you know, that has no regulatory effect. It's just a list, but still, it's good. I mean, you know, it's better than nothing, right? So it's a step in the right direction. That's that pragmatic, you know, it's like people are being poisoned from here to the wall, and we made it a step towards, you know, providing funding for remediation of supplies, and we need money across the country. I mean, in my mind, it's a tough call, but we need a couple $1 billion, you know, and nothing has been allocated. Prohibiting the use and storage of firefighting foam containing PFAS at military bases and facilities, not Congress, but DOD voluntarily, they did ban it. So they banned the use of PFAS for practice at the end of 2019. So that was a victory for us. Okay, so we got a victory. But they still use the stuff for emergencies. And they also use it for degreasing, and they use it for chrome plating, and so do all the industries. And so let me give you an example of where just tens of thousands of gallons of this stuff is deposited into your water. You know how when you have a coaxial cable on the back of your cable box, you ever peeled one of those things back and you got the plastic or whatever it is, and then you have that wire mesh that goes around it, and then you got the wire, you know, the two wires. So it's that wire mesh is made of PFAS. Right, and it's because otherwise it would get too hot and melt the outside. So you need a coating in there. So there's just one example of how it's used. Oh man, maybe I should just keep hitting enter or something. So anyway, they want to provide medical screening. So we go back to Hawaii. So, you know, here's what I have to say basically, okay? What Hawaii needs to do, what the federal government needs to do, where the legislation needs to happen. Look, I've given up on the federal government. I'm working in several states, you know, New Hampshire and Maryland and California and now Hawaii. This is what you need to do. You need to immediately warn pregnant women, don't drink any PFAS. Get your water tested. There are plenty of private wells, water systems. Don't drink tap water. And don't drink well water unless you're darn sure there's no PFAS in it. It's that serious, you all. Okay? And then we need to establish a maximum contaminant level of 1 part per trillion for all, PFAS, in groundwater and in drinking water. Now, New Jersey passed a law that has it at 13 parts per trillion for groundwater and drinking water. Okay, I mean, you have, I would imagine, areas in Hawaii with hundreds of thousands or millions of parts per trillion in the groundwater. You need to stop. So just look at how some states are acting and some states are not. You have to test and publish levels of the 14 most common PFAS. It's just the first step, and for all water systems. And you got to test for private wells, and you need to set maximum contamination levels for all food, especially seafood. And we need to, before it goes on the shelf, it needs to be tested for the levels. And then, the asparagus, small graves, and lettuce, we know that that's bad. We need to test all sewer sludge in the state of Hawaii before it's slathered on fields. And then we need to, if it's being incinerated here, we've got to stop that. And we're going to have to ban the manufacture and use. The European Union just did that last week. But it doesn't go into effect, the complete ban for another 8 years, I believe. So they're getting rid of it. I mean, entirely. Chrome plating, degreasing, whatever its use might be. So the EPA right now, if you go on their site, they list 20 states that have some regulations, have some resources available, for the public to learn about PFAS. Hawaii's not one of them. Now, I mean, here's a good piece of. Have you ever heard of thegardenisland.com? Is that? No, it's a Hawaii company.
Magazine on Hawaii.
Hawaii. But anyway, environment. So they went somewhere for bad information, and they're giving it to the Hawaiian people. Don't worry. Really, there's not much in the press here. And what I found is incorrect. So, my son's military forces, by the way. Now, do you know about bombs in your backyard? You ever heard of that website before? Let me just go through this real quickly. 1,100 hazardous sites. Forget how many numbers there are. But I mean, each one of these, Pearl Harbor, Shafter, all these, you can go to them, and when you see one that says high risk, you're kind of like in trouble. But we just keep going, and I'm going to click on NAVFAC Pearl Harbor. Let me get there. Hang on. I mean, you get the idea here, right? I did.
Wait. There's a second one.
No, but there's 5 of them.
We passed 2.
Yeah, that's.
And then that one?
Yeah, there it is. See how they got it so that you can't understand, you go by it. It's NAVFAC P-Harbor. So you know, yeah. Okay, okay, cool, I'm good. You guys know where that is, huh?
There's my house.
Yeah. Poor guy. Okay. Now, you can click on any one of these. I just want to show you how to do it, okay? And so you click on it, and you'll see the contamination. And let's just look at this for a second, because it's really bad. This is really the worst in the country. All right. So look at the chromium-6. Anybody remember what chromium-6 was? Remember Aaron Brockovich?
Yeah.
Well, they had 550 parts per billion. They had 550 parts per billion in the water in the Aaron Brockovich movie. You all have 1,370,000 parts per billion of chromium in your groundwater. If somebody is drinking the well water, most of these plumes travel at about a mile a year. So, and they've been doing this for 20, 30 years. You could be 20, 30 miles away with a well. And you could be drinking these carcinogens that are thousands of times higher than that was on the movie on Aaron Brockovich. But I just wanted to show you how to get there. I'm going to get off of this. And so I'll press the green button. No, shit. Where'd he go? He's gone. So you can go to the National Institutes of Health, Library of Medicine, and you can search, and it'll tell you all the different things that you're supposed to do. Okay, so we just get to the heart of this right now. Look, I'm sorry, 580 parts per billion of chromium-6 in the groundwater in Hinkley, California. You all have 1 million and something here in Hawaii in the groundwater. I mean, that's some serious stuff. And you have 2.7 parts per billion in Kaleo and 6.8 parts per billion in Kula. So, and we know that just because the EPA arbitrarily puts a limit at something doesn't mean it's not carcinogenic as you go. Let me keep going here. Now these are the sediments that are in the groundwater, and then the soil, and then the water. I didn't do the DBT. I'm proud. Groundwater. Okay, well, you've seen this, right? Beryllium. All right, now let me go down. Hang on, guys, we got 5 minutes left here. The 790 parts per billion of trichloroethylene is highly carcinogenic. That's in the soil at Pearl Harbor, and that's some really bad news. You've got mercury, you've got DBT, you've got arsenic, and let's see, more from Pearl Harbor. All of this is in Pearl Harbor. You can go through it. And in groundwater, you see everything, and then soil, and then more in Pearl Harbor. All of these contaminants in Pearl Harbor and groundwater. Are there military contaminants? Here's Hickam. Hickam is clean. There's no problem at Hickam. Hickam is clean as a whistle, and you don't need to worry. Do not worry about Hickam. Schofield, 155 active sites, inactive sites, everything's clean. Schofield's totally cleaned up. Do not worry about Schofield. I'll get through this real quick. I'm being very sarcastic about that. I mean, they just wash their hands of it, and that's it. Hang on. Okay, you want to go to the state of Hawaii safe drinking water drainage system. It's a geo-map, and then you can pull up different wells at different places, and then you can determine the chemical contamination at those places. Okay, so here's a few of them. But even more importantly, let me give you this website before the pastor becomes violent. Let's see. Okay, so here are all your utilities. It's not one, Hawaii water agency. So all of these little places are responsible for the contamination in your water. It's the worst system you could possibly have. People are getting poisoned by the water that they drink. So the work is to call Kahuku and just say, look, you guys have 3,400 customers. What's in the water? I want a water report. You got PFAS in it? What are you testing? What are you not testing? Find out exactly what they test. Look at all the chemicals that the military is putting into the ground. Go to the PubMed of the National Institute of Health and find out, doggone it. Find out what they're not telling you. And here are more, water systems throughout Hawaii. Okay, that's the work that you have to do. And I want to, respect the pastor's wishes and walk off. Give him some feedback, right? So where is the guy? He is. Here we go, John. And you want to tell him thank you? Well, any questions you want to talk about? Yeah.
Do you have a website or a YouTube video of this presentation?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. We're going to be taping this, right? And getting it online somewhere? Okay. And where will that go? Can you just send it to me and then I'll put it up on? Okay, it's militarypoisons.org.
Will be there.
Yeah, militarypoisons.org. And I'll create a tab up top. Just put Military Poisons Hawaii. Military Poisons Hawaii. Google that and you'll find it. But give me a couple of days.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, the water. Well, even the Obama administration, bottled water is a big business, and so there was a story that was 2 years ago when a really contaminated base up in New England with PFAS was ordered by the Army, it was the Navy, to supply all of the soldiers with bottled water. And nothing about the community. But they tested the bottled water for the PFAS, and the bottled water had PFAS. And so there's no federal guidelines regarding the the levels of PFAS in bottled water. But the industry has agreed to self-regulate. Okay, and they're calling, yeah, thank you, for 10 parts per trillion as a self-regulatory measure in drinking water. So, I mean, in their tap. So that's how we go. Thanks, Pastor.
No worries. Sorry to. I'm gonna.
No, it's all good.
I'll walk behind you and get all that stuff put away.
Yeah, no, it's all good. But let me just 5 minutes of a summary here, okay? I believe this is an existential threat to humans. I really think that we're looking at one of the last generations of untainted human beings. I think that you have a tremendous amount of work to do. I think you start by going to Bombs in Your Backyard. You download all of the contaminants that are put into the ground. And then you go to EWG TAP. That's another one I didn't mention earlier. I flew through it. But the EWG is the Environmental Working Group, and they have they've got a website where you can put your zip code in, and you can get the water report from your zip code. But it's not the in detail water report that you get as a consumer. It's just limited to a few things. Like, I don't know if you've ever paid attention, but every year you get a water report. And that water report has some chemicals in there. So you want to really start paying attention to what the levels are. And then you want to be cognizant of the fact that the EPA hasn't changed any of the regulations, hasn't tightened any of the regulations, and largely hasn't added any in 20 years, while the population of chemicals have absolutely exploded. So this is something that you've got to do to protect your health and the health of your children and your grandchildren. And then, you know, the PFAS is just a horrendous chemical. But I'd also be looking at the chromium hexavalent, that Aaron Brockovich chemical. And then another one is trichloroethylene. It is just an incredibly powerful killer. So when you see those, understand cadmium too. You should not be doing. They shouldn't be doing any weapons testing in water. And we need to have all surface areas, runoff from basins tested. And you know, I already went through the legislative stuff, right? You can't incinerate the stuff anymore, and you got to start testing the sewer sludge, and you got to start testing all the water, and you have to institute a maximum contaminant level for PFAS in drinking water. And so that's it. Thank you very much. It's humbling. Everybody go away.
Thank you. While we're cleaning up and before we leave, there's actually something you can do. Is we have some letters to Governor Eby and Senator Schatz about the Red Hill fuel tanks. If you don't mind signing them, and if they're form letters, but if you write a little personal note, like I live in Manoa, you know, this is going to affect my family and our water. So the letters are back there. So we're going to start cleaning up. Thank you for coming.